Is that going to be?
He's the youngest leader in Latin America. At 38 years old, the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, comfortably won the general election in February. Bukele enjoys a nearly 90% approval rating. But there are challenges ahead. With one of the highest murder rates in the world, perhaps the main challenge for Central America's smallest country is gang-related violence. And slow growth has kept El Salvador's social and economic development stagnant. Corruption costs the government millions of dollars, and ever since the 12-year civil war ended in 1992, hundreds of thousands of Salvadorians have been fleeing the country every year, seeking a safe place to live and better opportunities. But President Bukele seems determined to turn things around. With just a few months in office, he's traveled extensively, from North America to the Asia-Pacific and to the Middle East. In Mexico, he secured investments on social programs that aim to reduce migration to North America. In China, he signed deals that will improve roads and facilities across El Salvador. And in Qatar, Bukele looked for opportunities in the energy sector and attended meetings with other world leaders at the Doha Forum. That's where we caught up with him. The president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, talks to Al Jazeera. Nayib Bukele, president of El Salvador, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. You took up your job on the 1st of June, so you've just done over 6 months. Can I ask you about the state of your country? And given the level of violence there still is, are you dealing with a crisis?
Yes, we're dealing with a lot of crisis. But the fact is that El Salvador has changed a lot in the last 6 months. For example, crime, which is probably our worst crisis, we have lowered crime by 60%. Homicide rate has dropped by 60%, and we've been fighting corruption very, very strongly. And there's a lot of hope in the country. And isn't that something, of course I would say that it's a lot of hope in the country, but the fact that every poll gives us 90, 91, 93% approval ratings.
So the only way is down now?
True, yes, of course. But the fact that 9 out of 10 Salvadorans in a country we had a civil war 30 years ago. So it's a country that is used to being polarized. And the fact that we had a party that was the radical right and the very leftist party, and that was very polarized. I mean, you had ultra-nationalism against communism and Marxism. And now you have 90% of the country, even a little more than 90% of the country, that's not on the right and the left, but it's thinking forward and wanting to have a better country and wanting to, I think a lot of things have changed.
Staying with those poll ratings, clearly some of it is about you being a brand new type of leader, the youngest in Latin America, a new political party. Some would make the accusation that with you, what they're getting is style and charm. Is there proof yet there's substance with you as well?
Well, I was mayor of a small town before I was mayor of the capital. And then I was mayor of the capital before I was president. So people know my style of governing. It's not that I just show up and say, okay, I want to be president, and then people voted for me.
Let me talk about two of the biggest problems that you're facing, and they are the endemic corruption and the gangs. Let's start with the corruption. You had a slogan in your election, there's enough money when no one steals. What are you going to do about the corruption? You've already said you're going to set up a new international body. Explain how that's going to work.
We already set it up. We already signed the agreement with the Organization of American States. We have some agreements with the United Nations. The office is already open. They already named a commissioner. They have already signed agreements with us, with the executive branch, with the Attorney General. It's already set up, and it's going to start investigating cases soon. And I think it's not only the commission, but it's also the government. I mean, the people that is working with us. We have a minister of public works that's 29 years old. We have half of our cabinet are women.
So you say it's going to start work soon. When will it start proper investigations, do you think?
When we're going to start judicializing cases, that's going to take probably 6 months to a year. But already, the fact that the commissioner is already there, that the OAS has named a commissioner, that the offices are open, that they are signing the agreements, that they are hiring the people, that they are starting to look at the cases, just that fact has already frightened a lot of corrupt officials. And the new, at least the top officials, the ministers, they're people that are new, that have no background of corruption, that are mostly young, mostly women. I think there's a lot of change from the top down. Someone said that you have, from corruption, you have to, it's like the stairs. They have to, with the broom, you have to go from the top down, not from the bottom up. So in this case, we have been tackling down corruption from the top down by putting ministers and top officials and the heads of the agencies and departments, people that are not corrupt. And this new commission is going to investigate everybody.
So when it comes to the top of the stairs,
yes,
they'll be able to look anywhere and at anyone in the country, in previous administrations, people who led them, your administration, anyone in your administration, including you.
Yes, of course. Yes, that's the mandate that the commission has. It's not. If not, it will be like, just another show. It's a real commission. It's backed by international multilateral organizations. I mean, it's not a joke. It's something that is very, very serious, and it has a 90% approval rating as well, the commission. So I think it's going to work very well. I think it's going to be an example for the region and for other countries in the world that might have the same corruption problems like the whole of Latin America.
Your other huge problem is the gangs.
Yes.
You are a country that's not technically at war, but you have levels of violence, yes, that look like countries that are at war. How are you going to root out the gangs?
Well, we have lowered crime by 60%. We have homicide rates dropped by 60%. Other crimes have been lowered by similar numbers, 40, 50, 60%. Other types of crime, violent crimes. October was the safest month since the war, since the Civil War.
So what are the tactics you're employing?
Well, several. First, we send the army to the streets. That's probably not very popular internationally, but it was needed in our country. We changed the strategy by focusing. I mean, we have a 21,000 square kilometer country, which is quite small, but at the same time, we have a police force that's not enough to cover the whole country. So what we did was that we focused, the police we made a map of, we call it a heat map, where you have most of the violent crimes that are committed in the most populous areas. So we concentrated the police force and the armed forces in those areas where you have the most crimes. We closed communications in jails. In the jails you had Wi-Fi, cell phones, computers, everything. And they were ordering the killings from the jails. And
so they were the headquarters of the gangs, were in the jails?
Yes, we were paying for their headquarters. Now, of course, we're paying for their food and their their learning and other things, but not for their headquarters because they have no communication, no illegal communication anymore. We're looking at the structures, who's operating, who's commanding the structures. We make a map. We take out the main pieces of the puzzle, and then the organization stops working. They don't know how to manage, how to control. So the gangs are already, they don't know how to regroup, actually. That gives us a huge window and buy us time so we can revamp everything. And we're fighting crime better than before. We're building a 32 million forensic lab. We didn't have a forensic lab before. It sounds ridiculous, but we didn't have a forensic lab. So if someone came and killed someone, and you don't have any witness, then it's gone. I mean, you cannot catch the killer. And now, in a year from now, when the forensic lab is done, we could find the killer with DNA if he leaves a hair or a piece of skin or his fingerprints. We'll have one of the finest forensic labs in whole Latin America, but there in El Salvador.
If you look back just recently, 2015, the murder rate in your country was 103 people killed for every 100,000 people. That's higher than countries actually at war, like Libya, Somalia, or Ukraine.
Yes,
now it's come down a bit, I take that, but can you paint for our...
It has come down 85% from that number.
But can I ask you to paint for a picture for us, for people around the world who've not been to El Salvador, what that means for ordinary people? How do these gangs operate and how does it affect ordinary people's lives?
First, it's a crisis, a huge crisis, you have to deal with it. But you have to take into consideration several things. First, the number has gone down for 85%, 60 since we took office. That's for one. So the number is, the crisis is 8 times smaller. The other is that most of the killings are between gangs. So most of the killings are because of fighting for territory. This gang wants this territory or a piece of it, and this gang wants to defend it. So most of the killings are because gang members crossing to other gang members' territory. So you have to lower that number. That 15%, you have to cut it in half, let's say. So then the population is afraid, of course, but it's afraid of a 7% of what you have there, because that's what attacks the common citizen that's going on to work or in bus to school or walking in the street.
You've talked about your military response, your policing response, the tough approach that you're going to take with intelligence and technology. But surely there's another side to this, particularly as the gangs, some of them involve children, there are women who are part of the gang culture. What are you going to do about trying to reintegrate these people into normal society?
It's obvious that it's a social problem. And it's obvious that policing and armed forces and technology, even technology and forensics and even science, it's only like if somebody has a tumor, a brain tumor, and he goes to the doctor and the doctor says, okay, I'm going to prescribe some medication for the pain, right? But that's not the cure, of course. I mean, he's not going to get cure of the tumor by taking a lot of pain medication. He's going to get cured of the tumor with radiotherapy or chemotherapy or with an operation, right? Not with painkillers. But the fact that we need painkillers because the pain was too high. We had to lower those numbers to give us a window.
What are you going to do though with these ex-gang members? Because isn't there a danger? Yes, some of them will be in prison for a long time because they've committed very serious crimes. But when they come out, won't many of them face pariah status? Because they've been marked for life, many of them. They have tattoos from head to toe.
Well, of course, there's not an official census because nobody will go and sign in. We think that we have around 70,000 gang members. That's 1% of the population. They make a lot of, 1% is a lot. I mean, it sounds like a little, but 1% of a criminal organization, there's a lot. But most of them, they're kids. Most of them are 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds. They don't go around and kill people. They're just kids that they used to go and collect extortion money or go to the corner and tell if the police is coming. Most of these kids are very easy to reincorporate to society because they're not criminals. They're just helping probably their siblings or their friends in the community. So this type of gang member, which is 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, they're easier to reincorporate them into society. Then you have the dangerous kind of gang member, which is the one who kills and rapes and do all sorts of things. That one has to go to jail and has to pay for what they've done.
And those are the gang members that you hear US politicians talking about, MS-13 members, for example, they talk about. And they're constantly, including President Trump, saying there's a real danger of these gang members coming into the United States. It's one of the main arguments against immigration coming from the South. But in fact, it seems to me the evidence is absolutely the reverse.
Yes,
many of these people are people fleeing violence. So what do you say to those US politicians?
Not only that, but the fact that MS-13 was created in the United States. I mean, it was not created in El Salvador. We imported that problem from the United States with deportations. The problem is that most of the people fled our country in the Civil War.
So President Trump's got it wrong. Do you tell him he's got it wrong?
Well, I don't want to get it out with President Trump, but the fact is our people, they just went to the United States escaping from a civil war, a huge civil war. There was a reflection of the fight between the West and the East. I mean, we were fighting an army funded by the United States against a guerrilla funded by the Soviet Union. So in El Salvador, we only knew that an MS-13 gang existed in the United States. We didn't have any members in El Salvador. But with deportations, they said, okay, we're going to send the criminals, right? We're going to send away the criminals. But the fact is that sending away the criminals sounds very nice. The problem is who's getting the criminals, right? So they started sending back gang leaders from the United States to El Salvador. And they started creating branches in El Salvador of the gang that was created in the United States. Right now, El Salvador is not the only country that has MS-13. There's MS-13 in El Salvador, there's MS-13 in Honduras, in Milan, in Italy, in the United States, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in Virginia. So the fact is that, and it's not only Salvadorans. For example, in Honduras, 90% of the members are Hondurans. It's an international criminal organization that is very unsophisticated. It's mostly made up of young people. It's a social problem that is reflected on a criminal problem, and it started in the United States.
But the United States, as a result of this, and the Trump administration, have mentioned taking action against your country and others. Now, they've backed down a little bit, but they've cut some of the foreign assistance that they send to your country. They were going to kick out 200,000 of your citizens in the US. They now say they can stay until January 2021, extended for 1 year. What do you say to the US about these measures?
Well, most of those measures have been reversed already. For example...
Well, put on hold.
No. Actually, for example, the aid, they turned that back on. We got it back. The people that were supposed to be expelled from the country in January 4 next year, I mean, in less than a month, they just extended that a year and 2 years for Salvadorans. So, and the previous extensions of TPS were 18 months. So actually, we're getting a larger extension now than what we got before with the previous administrations. It's mostly the language that has changed, because right now they don't call it an extension. They said we're extending the work permits and the right of those people to stay here, but we're not calling an extension of temporary protection status.
And those people have been living for many years in the US, but they are still important to your economy, aren't they? Because they send money home, and that's about a third of your GDP.
Well, the most important thing is that they're human beings and they're Salvadorans, and we have to take care of them. It's 200,000 people. Now they have 200,000 kids that are American citizens, US citizens. So what we told the administration, the US administration, the Trump administration, we told them, it's our problem, the 200,000 Salvadorans, but it's your problem, the 200,000 US citizens who are underage, that you're going to send them back to where? I mean, send them back to their country. Their country is the United States. They were born here. They don't even know El Salvador. They've never been there. So it's your problem as well.
We've talked about one superpower. I want to ask you about another rising power in the world, and that is China. And you recently came back from a visit in China. The previous administration, 18 months ago, switched from diplomatic recognition of Taiwan to recognition of Beijing. You, before you took up your post, were somewhat critical of China. You said China meddles in democracy. Your most recent comments, though, are that you're going to get a big investment. You say China is going to provide a gigantic, non-refundable cooperation.
Yes.
Can I work out where you stand on China? Are you sticking with Beijing, or might you switch back to recognizing Taiwan? Has a decision been made?
Yeah, a decision has been made. You cannot ignore China. I mean, China is the second largest economical superpower.
But you don't have to take investments from them, and I'm going to quote you your own words. China is not playing by the rules. They go and do projects, leaving countries the huge loans which they use as leverage. Do you stand by that, and are you worried it'll happen to you?
No, because we haven't loaned anything.
But they're coming to do investments in your country. Will they want something in return?
The recognition of them, and to make a decision, and that we want to stay with recognizing China, which is actually, I mean, what was the option? I mean, you cannot, there's only, what, 13, 15 countries in the world that don't recognize China as a country, and it's even ridiculous. I mean, you cannot not recognize China as a country.
Do you believe that China plays a little bit of a negative role sometimes in world affairs? Well, just within its own borders, the current situation in Hong Kong, or the detention of 1 million Uyghurs?
Yeah, I think if you can tell me any huge country, and you can pick up 4 or 5 things that we might not be, we might not agree with. If you say Russia, for example, you say France, or you say the United Kingdom, or United States, or I mean Brazil. If you want to talk about the BRICS, India. I mean, you can pick any country and tell me, what do you think about the nuclear proliferation of India, for example? And, you know, I don't want to get at odds with any superpower. I just want the best thing for our country. That's a pragmatic foreign policy. We don't want to. El Salvador is not a player in the world that might switch things in the planetary scale. But we might do the best thing for our country. So, I mean, for us, foreign policy is not a matter of changing the world as it is, but more of how can we insert our country in this huge economy so that we can help our people.
And in terms of your region, can I ask you about one important development in your foreign policy, and that's with regard to Venezuela. You there have kicked out the diplomats representing Nicolas Maduro, and instead inviting in those from his rival, Juan Guaido. He said he was the legitimate president almost a year ago. And yet we have stalemate. The most recent talks in Barbados have broken down. Do you see any positive moves to resolving this humanitarian crisis?
Well, you just said it's a humanitarian crisis. And the other thing is that it's a matter of time. I don't know if Juan Guaido might succeed, but I'm sure Maduro cannot stay in power for long. I mean, people are getting salaries of $2 or $4 a month. Working 8 hours a day to get $4 a month, you cannot buy a piece of bread and some eggs with a month's salary in Venezuela. So he can't stay in power for long. Now you will say, why do you meddle into Venezuela? And not, well, it's different because you're talking about our region. First, second, the Venezuelan diplomats were meddling into our politics back in El Salvador, financing our the party of our former government. So of course, I mean, we kicked them out because it was the right thing to do first, but also because they were meddling into our politics.
I think you have a different.
So back again is a pragmatic approach to foreign relations.
You have a very interesting perspective on this because you were earlier in your career a representative of a left-leaning party. You've gone on a political journey. You now have a more capitalist outlook, it seems to me. In the past, looking back on your views of Venezuela, was there a time when you admired Hugo Chavez, for example?
Well, there's some things you had to admire about Hugo Chavez, but I think Hugo Chavez was a creation of the Venezuelan right. So if you see some of the things he'd done at the beginning, it was very interesting. Now with time, it started evolving into something very different. A lot of corruption, a lot of Chavista officials having billions of dollars overseas. So then it evolved into something worse and worse and worse. And then you don't want to associate yourself with that. I mean, sometimes things start a good way, but they don't end in a good way. It has happened in El Salvador as well.
Finally, Mr. President, I see a bit of a trend. You are 38 years old, and there are young leaders emerging in different parts of the world, New Zealand, Ukraine, Finland. I was in New York in September at the UN General Assembly, and you went to the podium, and in your speech, you pulled out your phone and did a selfie in front of all the dignitaries there and said, well, more people will see this selfie than will listen to my speech. What do you think this young generation of leaders bring to the world, not just in their communication methods, but in actual substance?
It's not an achievement per se to be young, but I think that this new generation has been surrounded by different things in a world that is totally globalized and interconnected. All of these newcomers, even though I don't know any of them, but they share what they were surrounded with in their upbringing. So now they are being placed in positions of power. I don't know if they're going to be good or bad, but I bet they're going to be different. So that's going to change the world. It's going to change the world. And the world's going to change anyways, even if we don't want it to change. So the people are going to ask for changes, and the new leaders are going to, that are able to respond to these aspirations that the people have now are going to be the new world leaders, and those world leaders are going to change the world.
President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
No, thank you for having me.